Friends, it's another Friday when I'm greeting you with a finished model, and that means making another diorama. This is the KV2 from Tamiya in 1/48 scale that I've been painting over the past few weeks, and here is the styrofoam base for the upcoming scene. There's gonna be some kind of building in the background to set the vibe, and I also have some figures from Reskit, but we'll talk about those later. Let's start with the building, because that's what I always look forward to the most, and the structure in this scene will be a brick industrial chimney. Making this thing was possible thanks to the circular adapter for this large, clunky foam cutter I bought on eBay. I still use it from time to time, even though the Proxon Thermocut is more user-friendly, but this one comes in handy for cutting large pieces or circular shapes. Well, my first attempt wasn't the greatest, but after increasing the heat, the result was pretty good, so I could cut it according to the diorama, this time on the thermocut, because working with this machine is just more enjoyable. So yeah, this is our basic composition. Simple, not too crowded, and we can still see the entire tank even from the other side, as the chimney doesn't block the view as a large building would. Okay, cutting the bricks was tedious, I won't lie about that. I even managed to pull a night shift because of them. I had the basic shape of the diorama ready at 9 PM and kept sculpting the chimney until 3 AM. I just couldn't leave my workbench. Bricks are addictive, I guess. I just had to keep in mind two things. The shape of the chimney would mess up the straight line as I was carving them horizontally, so I had to be careful there, and also, because the chimney gets narrower towards the top, I had to keep using a template for the vertical cuts, not just make a cut in the middle of the previous brick, because then I'd end up with smaller and smaller bricks, if you catch my drift. Sculpting and enlarging the gaps was the rewarding part, and it felt very refreshing to make this kind of surface on a circular shape, not a straight wall as I did on all my previous buildings. To make the most out of this, I pressed a lot of them inside or at an angle to give the surface as much texture as I could, without compromising its structural stability, or at least in theory. But because I physically couldn't and didn't even want to build it at its full height, I had to demolish the top section. My options were pretty limited here in multiple aspects, one of them being the inside of the thing. Foam is hard to carve from both sides, and I definitely wasn't making it hollow, so I'll just clog it with debris later. The base was done using the same method, but here I also used the concrete frame, if that's the correct term, simply by gluing additional strips of foam and texturing them with a stiff old paintbrush. You can create all kinds of exciting surfaces with this material, not gonna lie. Of course, I had to fill the visible gaps with Bergswerk lightweight acrylic putty, and because I was already ruining, so to say, the pristine styrofoam surface, I went over the concrete with acrylic wood putty for that extra concrete texture. You can smoothen it out once it starts drying, creating a very convincing surface. Okay, moving on to quickly get the groundwork done, I first covered the entire base with acrylic textured paste from AK. Two reasons, the usual reasons for me. Reinforcing and protecting the fragile styrofoam and acting as a super grippy surface for VMS clay. That's my favorite terrain sculpting material, the Smart Mud 2.0 from VMS. You can buy it from Michigan Toy Soldier Company if you're in the US, and if you're a registered user and you use the promo code MFRIENDS2022, you'll get a 15% discount on every order. One of my favorite things about this material is its softness. You can easily press the tank into it, making sure it'll nicely sit on the ground, and also add all kinds of imprints, be it track marks, wheel traces, or just ruts made with a paintbrush handle. With the basic groundwork finished, I usually proceed to laminate the sides. At this stage, we're basically enclosing the ugly white styrofoam and making the scene look nice and tidy. Thin 0.4mm veneer is my favorite material for this because it's very hard and thus almost indestructible, yet it's very discreet because of its thinness. That's the opposite of thickness, right? I like to secure it with double-sided tape because it creates an immediate, firm bond, although I might give a hot glue gun a try in the future. Once the sides are trimmed exactly according to the terrain, I apply a thin coat of VMS Smart Mud, effectively and definitely blending the veneer with the ground, making the overall presentation more presentable. Then it was about the usual texturing. I'll just speedrun you through this process, okay, because I want to get to the fun part. So, sprinkling fine real earth from my garden, trademark, over diluted PVA glue for that final, realistic ground texture. Once the crust was nice and dry, I added small amounts of grass here and there, planted using a static grass applicator as usual. Even an industrial yard, if left neglected, will get overgrown with all kinds of vegetation. As such, a few random vines made from seafoam trees won't hurt. Although I bought some nice cable reels from Plus Model to set that industrial vibe, they were just too large for the scene. So a bunch of plastic drums, some jerry cans, and even pieces of gear from Tamiya saved the day for me. I also found a good use for these plaster bricks I had in my stash for the longest time. They're in the 1/35th scale though, so I had to cut them down to a more reasonable size. At least I ended up with a plenty of rubble because that's like a rule, right? Even if a building is only mildly damaged, there's always a lot of rubble. I know that from my own experience. When I was removing an old, ugly windowsill from my laundry room, there was like a full bathtub worth of broken concrete and rebar. So yeah, debris will make the scene look more authentic and also enhance the vibe a little. After all, I'm trying to capture a moment from winter 1943 in Leningrad. Okay, sweet, so now we have the construction part behind us, and right now, nothing fits together. But we'll fix that with paints and snow. I started the usual way, priming some key elements with a dark primer. Mahogany brown this time, and I sprayed it mainly on the chimney and, most importantly, the bright green grass. That was a real eyesore and would never fit in a gloomy, cold scenery. But check it out, even a quick blast of primer completely changes the tone of the diorama. Now I could give the grass the color I actually wanted, a dry yellowish tone. I didn't want any green tones in this diorama, I just think it wouldn't really work. So this was a 2-layer ordeal. German yellow was the first coat and the second layer was highlighted with a few drops of white for a more three-dimensional look. The chimney was sprayed with hollow red and flat yellow. I just kept making the color lighter by adding more and more yellow, thus creating all these different orange tones. I even added a bit of deck tan for a more desaturated tone here and there. I just find it quicker than meticulously painting each brick with the paintbrush, although we'll get to that momentarily. All these tones were also sprayed over the rubble, and I was pleasantly surprised by how good this was starting to look. I could even leave it like this. I don't know why, but the airbrushed rubble just looked very pleasant to my eye. Oh, and yeah, the ground was quickly post-shaded with a mixture of buff and German grey, the same colors I used for the dry mud on the tank. And here's how you can quickly shift the tone of your scene to exactly where you want it, regardless of the materials you used. But all of this is just a foundation for a more meticulous painting with brushes and other things. Because right off the bat I started adding the brick lines using a silicone brush, which still technically qualifies as a brush, I guess, and the mortar is once again made from Bergswerk lightweight acrylic putty. I like to apply these very rough. I know it's sometimes not very realistic, but I like the gritty, decaying look of old brick walls. Painting and weathering were completely carried out with acrylic paints because foam wouldn't survive enamel thinners. But I mean, acrylic paints are very efficient as they dry super fast and you can layer them quickly until you achieve the desired result. My color palette for weathered brick walls is light mud, deck tan, sometimes even pure white, all from Vallejo, and I always start with these lighter tones. Then I switched to darker paints such as burnt umber from AK and black brown from Vallejo. This way it's possible to achieve a nice, faded, partially dusty, partially grimy look. It's much more efficient to differentiate the bricks after all of this is done, because you have far more control over the effect. You can easily control the intensity by how much you thin the paint. And that's the result. It took only a fraction of time compared to the construction and sculpting phase, and it's easy to see why this is one of my favorite parts of diorama making. I keep saying that I should build a standalone model of some industrial building, but trust me, one day I'll finally do it. Moving on with my least favorite part of diorama making, painting the ground with enamels so it matches the earth tones I have applied on the tank. It's just a very monotonous job and it takes way longer than it should. However, it's very important. Because I used turned earth from ammo and winter streaking rime to paint the dark mud tones on the KV2, the same colors were used here. And as a small bonus, you can emphasize every terrain feature. You're basically post-shading the ground. And with that out of the way, I could finally add the snow and thus, at last, let the whole scene make sense, because until now, whenever I placed the tank on the ground, it just looked like from another universe. Just like in the past, and in fact, not so long ago on the Panzer 38T vignette I did for my friend, I used two acrylic products from AK. Snow sprinkles for the majority of the work, that's this one, and snow. That's the entire name of it, which you'll see in a moment. I wanted to apply the snow blanket in a non-blankety manner, meaning I definitely didn't want to cover all or even most of the ground. And that was most likely my downfall, because as you see, I applied it in this very textured manner. Basically, I was letting the snow sprinkles latch onto the ground texture. Be it protruding grass for that frosted vegetation effect, or the small rocks and clumps of earth on the ground. This works perfectly for melting snow, but if it's freezing cold outside, the snow cover should be more uniform, and I didn't quite keep that in mind. As I was halfway there, I had to glue the tank to the ground for two reasons. Both are equally important, I guess. I needed to integrate it into the groundwork so it would nicely sit in the snow, and I could also use the snowy tracks as a reference point and thus get a better idea of how and where to adjust the snow-covered groundwork. At this point, I used the second snow paste to add more opacity to it, because snow sprinkles are translucent and also grayish in color, and they actually sparkle, so they're excellent for frozen or melting snow, but not so great for fresh, foamy snow. Anyway, this is what I ended up with, and I could definitely improve it by adding more snow and creating that opaque white blanket, but that could also make things worse, so I decided to just roll with it. And now for those rescued figures. I'll be honest, their quality was variable. The figure standing in the hatch was excellent right out of the box, but the pointing tanker had some really awful casting flaws. But hey, they're nicely detailed and I had a good time painting them using my traditional glazing method. I describe it in a lot of detail in a dedicated video if you want to learn more about it, but yeah, let's just say I did a quick job on these, and just like the base, they could be done better. There's no discussion about that. But because this supposedly quick and fun model quickly overwhelmed me, I had to wrap it up, so the only thing left was painting the sides with black household paint, thus finishing the scene and concluding this project. So anyway, my friends, another diorama for the display case, although this time I'm not as satisfied as I'd like to be. But modeling is not about raising the bar with every model you finish. I guess just like with everything in life. The takeaway from this diorama is probably not rushing things, even if it's your full-time job, or especially not then. And also, snow isn't as easy as it might seem after a few careful attempts. But it's all about having the right tools, materials, some good reference images, and taking your time to think before you do something. That's really important. So I guess it's all cool in the end. At least there's a finished diorama and some words of wisdom, right? Anyway, I'll take a short break before the next model because I really reached my limits this time. There's just so much to do every day, but I'll be done with my new house pretty soon, so things will get back to normal. I hope. All I can say for now is that the next model will be the exact opposite, and instead of Soviet winter, we'll go to a hot desert climate. Maybe desert with some mountains. That should be just the right amount of spoiling and teasing. In the meantime, I wanna say thank you for watching, my friends, and thank you to my awesome patrons who make this show possible. If you like what I'm doing and want to get more of it, and in return support my work, you can go to my Patreon page and see what kind of reward would you like. I'm posting there almost every day with updates for my workbench. We can get in touch through DMs, comments and emails. I'm posting 1 week early ad-free videos, although the new one is gonna come out the next week. I also have some small 3D models for detailing your projects, a bunch of references from the real world if you need inspiration for old buildings, landscapes and so on, and these beautiful studio photos which you can download in full resolution. Alright, dear friends, as I was finishing this diorama, I honestly wasn't having fun. And it was probably the first time when I felt like this was a regular job where things just had to be done. And I really don't want to feel like that again, so from now on I'll pace myself better and think about what can be done in a few days and crammed into one video. Just like the old days, eh? And you all stay safe, stay awesome, build your models, don't just collect them, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!